Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Precious, and I'm the African Chapter Chair. Today, I will be your host and moderator for the Around the World webinar titled Navigating Post MSCA Transition and Reintegration into your country, whatever your country is. So thank you for coming out to join us. We promise this webinar is going to be engaging. You'll love it. Please feel free to ask questions. Keep your questions and feel free to engage with our speakers so that we can make the most out of today. It's so good to have all of you here again. So whether you're watching us live or you're going to watch the rebroadcast, you're welcome and stay engaged. Thank you. So today we have a speaker from India, we have another speaker from Mexico, we have a speaker from Africa, and then from Argentina. They are going to be telling us their journey through MSCA and how they were able to reintegrate back into their country. They're going to tell us about their challenges, their expectations, were they met, were they able to stay, did they have to leave? All of that, we'll be having these interesting conversations with them. Keep your questions and please feel free to ask. Thank you. So the first speaker we are going to be having is from Mexico, Dr. Daniel Rose, as I call him. He's going to introduce himself to you and then tell us more about himself and his journey. So the next voice you'll be hearing will be that of Daniel Rose. Please feel free to engage with him. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Precious. Also, thanks everyone who's joining and thanks for organizing this webinar. So as Precious already mentioned, my name is Daniel and I'm here to talk about how was my transition from my MSCA funding back to Mexico. So just to start a bit about me, I'm from Mexico. I'm from Mexico City, where I did a bachelor's in biomedical research. From there, I did directly a PhD, again in Mexico, in the same university, but in a different state. This was again in biomedical sciences. And afterwards, I decided I wanted to go somewhere abroad for my postdoc. And I had already kind of a small insight from living in Europe after doing a research internship in Spain. I was there for a couple of months, and then I decided I really wanted to go back to Europe for my postdoc. So this is where MSCA comes in. I joined the EMBL, the European Molecular Biology Laboratory, where I did my postdoc under a co-fund project from the MSCA. This was a project, or rather a program that generated interdisciplinary projects. So I was actually working in two labs during my postdoc. One was a lab that was working with Drosophila genetics, and the second one was more about microfluidics and micropatterning. So this was a really, I must say, kind of a risky project. This was like the whole idea of this co-fund was to have like very out of the box interactions between different groups. So I was able to culture, sorry, Drosophila cells within microfluidic chambers. That was the main project. But afterwards, I also got involved in more in one of these two labs, and eventually I was able to stay 3 more years in this lab to continue doing my research. So I was already doing biology and I was already doing Drosophila genetics and developmental biology. So in the end, I was 6 years doing my postdoc. The 3 years were under the MSCA project, and afterwards it was just under the funding from the lab. And it was really nice that I could then just continue doing projects that were more on my own projects that I could propose by myself. So I don't want to take much time about this part. It's just a brief introduction. So this was the call that I joined. This was 2014. Then by 2020, I was already when I joined my new position. So for the new position, yeah, this was on April 1st. So it was a bit ironic because we were in the beginning of the pandemic. It was really challenging to move from continents, to move back from Mexico after 6 years with all the airports closing and all the lockouts and everything. That was a bit chaotic. But then I was able to join back my home university, the National University of Mexico, in the Biomolecular Research Institute, where I now have my own lab. This is my group. This is a picture from yesterday, and we are studying Drosophila developments and how different tissues interact with each other. So actually, this seems like a complaint that I started on April 1st, but I must say that for me, starting during the lockdowns from the pandemic was really, in a way, a good thing out of everything bad that came out from the pandemic, because I had a lot of time to transition back. When you're living abroad after a long time, you get used to certain things. You need to get acquainted again to just the traffic from Mexico City. So coming back to the during this time was really making it easier to transition back. So another thing that it's important to talk here is about funding. So when you are funded from an MSCA project, you really don't have to think much about funding. But now in countries like Mexico, you really need to start planning how are you going to do the research that you want to do when funding is not the same as you used to have before. So for something just to mention about the system in Mexico, so the PI salaries is fortunately they are covered by the university and the government. So you have different parts of the salaries being paid by the university or by the government. Grad student salaries are also covered by the government, so you don't have to get funding in order to get grad students. Then a difficult aspect of all this is that it's very difficult then to get, for example, if you want to get a technician, it's really difficult for you to hire a technician. You don't get enough funds so that you can just start your lab and hire a technician that will help you in the beginning. There are not many technician positions, so you need to wait until there's some space freed, so then you can recruit someone. In my case, this took like 3 years. Now I fortunately have a technician who is supporting us a lot in the lab. But also, then this means the grants are small, but actually all the money that we receive goes for research. We don't have to invest that in funding, in salaries. We have internal grants from the university. We have government grants, which right now are more difficult to access. There's a lot of cuts, so I haven't got any government funding so far. But fortunately, we have other organizations, international organizations, where we can apply. For instance, when I started my lab, I applied for a grant from the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology. And this was a collaborative research program that also had a section for early career researchers. I applied to this, and fortunately I got it. I wanted to share with you, these are the countries that can actually apply for this program. So it's basically Global South and some other countries. And it's really good to have this kind of program so that you can start your own research, especially going back to your own country. For me, it was also helpful to try to find other sources of funding, for instance, Eurobioimaging, which allowed us to go back to Germany. A student went there to carry on some of the experiments that we couldn't do here in Mexico. We also have been looking for funding in the US with the Genetic Society of America. Obviously, the MCAA, the Mexico chapter, which we created shortly after I came back to Mexico, has been extremely helpful to really try to connect with other scientists from around the world and from Mexico. And finally, I think the success strategies, I think if you want to do the research in a place where probably is not as strong investment in science, you would need to have a lot of collaboration. I think you have to collaborate within your institutions, but also outside. As I said, for me, it was good to go back to Europe and to try to do things there that we cannot do here. You have to build networks so that you can also find new collaborations and continue to increase the interactions with people. This applies in both cases for within their institutions, but also outside and outside of the country. And just a couple of examples. This is what has enabled us to do, we have been able to do this through our networks, creating meetings from young scientists to promote more science in Mexico. but also collaborating within the institutions to have funding, to have meetings, and to strengthen the communities of the research that you want to do back home. So I don't want to take much more time, so I'm going to stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Wow, this is so interesting. Thank you so much, Daniel. Wow, I love the presentation. I've learned so much. Maybe I will ask before any other person asks, were you in UNAM before you got the MSCA or after? Were
Sorry,
you already working in the university before you got the MSCA or after?
Well, I was doing my PhD, and when I was finishing my PhD, that's when I applied for the MSCA to do my postdoc.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Okay,
Yeah.
so you were not a staff in the university before
No,
you.
I had to apply again to
Oh,
go.
okay. Okay. Please, is there any other question for Daniel? Or maybe we should keep the questions to the end. Let's get all the presentations. Then at the end, we all have the questions. Thank you too for using your time very well for the time management. Thank you. So our next speaker will be Vicious. I'm so excited to hear what's happening at India, how people will integrate back from Europe into India. So Vicious, please introduce yourself and then please take us from there. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Precious. Just to confirm, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Great. Just let me. Okay. So good day to everyone from wherever you joined. Myself, Vishwas. I'm currently chair of the MCAA India chapter. Very glad to be part of this webinar, around the world webinar. Great initiative. I think we can learn from each other and also share our experiences from the current fellows, because some of them will probably go back and settle in their country of origin. So personally, currently I head data protection and privacy at Modern Spaces. Basically in the industry, I've never worked in the academia. So we are a deep tech scale-up. We have a platform in AI and IoT, and we manage workplaces and also digitized spaces for enterprises and commercial real estate in India. My areas of interest include data security, privacy, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, and wireless systems. My Marie Curie experience, I had two postdocs. One was in Greece, in Foundation for Research and Technology, Hellas in Crete. That was in 2009 and 11, long back, in the area of signal processing and wireless communications. And the second postdoc was in Padova, Italy, with Patavina Technologies. It was a startup. Now it is taken over by some other company. So this was during 2011 and 13. So before 2009, I did my PhD in Czech Republic with the collaboration with Siemens in Germany. And before that, I was in the UK for some time working for Samsung UK. So from 2002 till 2013, about 12 to 13 years, I was in Europe before deciding to go back to India in December 2013. So I've been working in industry since January 2024, that is after I came back to India. The current role is my third startup, mainly in IoT and data security areas. And the main or core reasons for my return were ample growth opportunities in India, especially in the startup ecosystem that we have in India. And also an opportunity, to apply the skills that I had from my PhD and postdoc experience in Europe, both technical as well as leadership roles. So when I was, applying during my last year of second postdoc in 2013, I saw a lot of opportunities in India, especially in startups. So I was really excited about it. And also we had issues with EU Blue Card because when I was in Italy, I think I made a case to the local Questura about application of my Blue Card, and it was a non-starter. So there were not many opportunities coming up in Europe at that time, at that point of time, and India was like exploding with opportunities. So it was a good decision to come back. And also family considerations, always we have family back home, and that's one of the primary considerations. So when we decided to move back, of course, my wife was also with me in Italy. The main challenges that we faced when we moved back to India, of course, there are differences in remuneration and perks because you're used to certain standards in salaries and perks in Europe. Also, taxation is different, and also non-resident status. So because once you're outside of your country, you're a non-resident. And when you come back, you have to, get used to the local taxation and non-resident status. So the first 5 years after you come back to your local country, you still apply the taxation under non-resident status. So that is also advantageous. Of course, even if you're local, you've been away for quite a lot of time, and the housing and travel, because the circumstances are different. And when you move back to India, usually the big cities, right? So the housing and travel are quite different. So there are advantages as well as challenges. So you have to, weigh them in. And opportunities in core research areas. So for example, especially when you've done your PhD and postdocs in Europe, especially under Marie Curie fellowships, you may not get to work in your core research areas back home. So you have to be a little bit flexible. And if you're lucky enough, you will get it in the same field that you worked during your PhD or postdoc. And also the research environment is quite different because the flexibility that you have or you may have in the labs in the Europe, they may not be the same, and the scope would be different because the priorities could be different in the labs that you work for, or the companies that you would work for eventually in India. And also when I was, because I'm more into applied R&D, not theoretical or basic research. So what I saw was applied R&D was very limited to a few engineering companies or startups and some government labs. So the opportunities, they're limited. So you have to be a little bit flexible about it because the opportunities are there. But if you really want to stick to what you were doing, the opportunities might be limited. And also work-life balance. So for example, when you have moved back to India in a very big city, the work-life balance can take a little bit of a backseat. So that also you should take into consideration. And also the opportunities and success strategies in terms of how do you go about it. So there are a lot of government labs in India, and the startup ecosystem is really good, especially in big cities like Bangalore, Hyderabad, Pune, and Mumbai, the big cities, and also Noida and Delhi, of course. So, and also private institutes. So for example, not all universities in India are funded by the government. So there are a lot of private institutes, whether you want to join the university as an academician or you want to be an entrepreneur and explore the startup ecosystem, or you want to go back to government labs, there are possibilities. So you just have to explore all the possible options before you make up your mind. And it's very important to, go about local networking because that is how you will land in those jobs or opportunities, because local connects always work. And also they may point you to the newer or upcoming opportunities. And also important to have professional memberships. So for example, myself, I had memberships in IEEE as well as IET, that is Institute of Engineering Technology and so on. So you get to meet people, go to the local events, and also talk about yourself and see, what people are doing, and also explore the opportunities. And also keep learning, because that never stops for us researchers. So it's always, important to keep that learning process. And also if there are volunteering opportunities, we can take them up and also, become more active in volunteering and learning. And also explore industry academia collaborations. I think for me, it was pretty straightforward because I was looking only at industry opportunities. But the moment you come back, you see that, there is a lot of collaboration happening between industry and academia. And having a PhD and also a postdoc experience, I think academic institutions would be interested in you in, having some collaborations because you've worked in industry, but you also have some sort of exposure to R&D in academic institutions or R&D labs in Europe. So they would always, encourage to give you an opportunity. So in terms of what we can avoid and what I learned during the process of reintegration when I came back to India about 11 years back. So I think we should stop undue comparisons. We should not really get into them because they're not going to help because the environment you're trying to compare are pretty different. So we should avoid them. And also there are a lot of pros and cons because as an growing economy, when I came back, India was really growing. Like even today, you have the growth rate of in excess of 8%, 10%. So the opportunities are huge. So, it's important to embrace both pros and cons. And also when you start applying, so for example, when you start applying, you need to be a little bit patient because you have to land the right job or the opportunity, not try to take whatever, comes up in the first place. For me, I was a bit fortunate because before I left Europe, I had one opportunity in hand. So I could directly go and join the company that I was invited to join. So I would say just wait for the right opportunity or roles. Don't rush. It may take a couple of months, but don't lose heart. Have some patience. And also, it's also important that you could consider consulting instead of, going full-time jobs because to test the waters, right? Even for the companies here, they don't know you because you've been away for a pretty long time. And you don't know the local ecosystem because you've been away. So consulting works in this situation, both for yourself as well as for the companies. So you could do consulting. That's what I did when I started off. I consulted for 3 to 6 months, and then we found that, okay, we are okay for each other. And then we signed a full-time job. So consulting is a good opportunity. And also currently in India, a lot of entrepreneurship options, a lot of funding available, and a lot of government support and private partnership with the governments. So a lot of opportunities. So it's also, good option to explore entrepreneurship options because that gives you a lot of freedom to start something of your own instead of, working for others. Of course, there are other global opportunities. Once you finish like postdoc or even the PhD in Europe, it doesn't mean that you cannot go back. You could also explore, say, for example, staff exchanges. Even if you join a lab, for example, in India, there are short-term staff exchange programs available. So you could still go back to your old institution or lab in Europe and still continue collaborating. So, and also outside of Europe, of course, in other parts of Europe, as well as outside Europe, there are opportunities. So I think we should not stop at looking at other global opportunities. And of course, join the local MCA chapter because there are a lot of events happening and there are opportunities for networking and like-minded people. And also, an opportunity to meet people who have gone through the same journey. So it's always helpful. So join the local MCA chapter. Also, if you have a Euraccess office in your country, get in touch. They have a lot of options available. And also, if you have the National Contact Point, NCPs in your country, that is also helpful. So specifically for India, so there are government-backed research initiatives. So in India, we have a lot of programs. So one of the programs that I was really excited about was the first one, the Professor of Practice under national or new education policy of 2020. This is done by UGC, Universities Grants Commission. So if you're working in industry and if you have a PhD and 5 years or more experience, you can still teach in universities as a professor of practice. So this is a good opportunity. Say, for example, this is in your free time on Saturdays or weekends or evenings. This is a very good opportunity for all of us. And also there are very specific labs. So for example, CSIR is a very good lab. They are multidisciplinary, and atomic energy, medical research, social science, agriculture. DST has a lot of grants, of course, as principal investigator or individual researcher, or you could also join CSIR labs. There are different labs across the country. Of course, ISRO and Aeronautics Research and Development Board, Ministry of Food Processing, of course, and Ministry of Rural Development. So there are a lot of opportunities across disciplines. So I suggest you explore according to your research interests and what you want to do. So for example, all of them, most of these government departments or ministries or labs, they have their own funding opportunities. So you could really explore if you want to take up the entrepreneurship route. So as Marie Curie, to just quote her, we can be less curious about people, but more curious about ideas. So it's always important to be focused on our research areas and ideas so that opportunities would definitely come chasing us. So if at all some of you who have joined from India or looking to go back to India after your current Marie Curie fellowships, do reach out to us through email or LinkedIn or website. India chapter is always available to collaborate and also looking for active volunteers. Thank you. It was really great to be part of this event, and I look forward to any questions if you have.
Thank you so much, Vishwas. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. He has given us a lot of suggestions, lesson learned. I have also learned a lot, and I hope you are learning too. So the next speaker is Dr. Maruf, and he's currently in Nigeria. So please, the next voice you will be hearing is that of Maruf. Thank you.
Good evening here. It's evening already here in Nigeria. So good evening, everyone. My name is Maruf Sani. Can you all hear me, please?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Oh,
I can hear you clearly. I can see your slide. Go ahead.
Oh, very well. Thank you very much. So thanks for the invitation. This is my name is Maruf Sani. As I said, I'm a deputy director of research at National Center for Technology Management in Nigeria. I'm also one of the MSCA national contact points for Nigeria. And my area of research basically looks at, decarbonization, within the economic, sector. And actually, that was also what my Marie Curie fellowship was all about. So this is what my outline looks like. I'm just going to quickly introduce my, MSCA fellowship. Then from there, I'll go to challenges. What are the opportunities that you may want to explore? Then what are the lessons learned, and then recommendations. So basically, for my MSCA experience, I did mine in Milan, Italy, to be precise. My institute, which is European Institute of Economics and Environment, they have quite a number of centers across Europe. So, but the one where I actually worked was in Milan. I think they have another one in Venice. And the department where I did mine was Sustainable Earth Modeling Economics division, and that was where I did my MSCA. Mine was around the Horizon 2020. Right now we have Horizon Europe. So mine then was, Horizon 2020, and it happened, in the middle of COVID. So again, that made it, a bit challenging, for me while I was in Europe. So I'm going to get to that, in a bit. So this particular agency, usually they got funding from several other agencies. One of them was Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change. They also got funding from Resources for the Future. Those are the two agencies supporting this particular institute where I did my my MSCA fellowship. And my supervisor was Professor Elena Fedolini, who was very helpful. I also got a project manager, during that time, in the name of Dr. Marie Skłodowska-Curie. Those two, women were actually, very helpful when I did my. Remember, I'm coming from English-speaking country, so interacting with somebody who understands English would be very helpful. So they understand English and were able to, communicate quite well. And they were, again, beyond that, they were also able to, move me around. So, that again, of course, helped a lot. Remember, you will have to do some, documentation in so many other places. So they were actually helpful in that regard. These are my colleagues from Nigeria. I'm also going to get to some of this picture in a bit. The one on the down below here, that is, those are my colleagues in Italy. Those ones at the top are my colleagues in Nigeria. I said I was going to get to it in a bit. The one in the frame on the right, those are in Italy. Where I'm getting to is that it's also important for you to to not leave everything back home when you are leaving your country, because it's also important you maintain the link with your researchers or your colleague, in your country. This is what I was doing, in Nigeria, because was why I was in Italy. I was also able to come back home to do one or two, seminars, which actually allowed me to link up with, the local actors within the country. This is another one. One I also did in Nigeria before the end of my fellowship. So the expectation when I was reintegrating into the system was not really strenuous. I think it was smooth, in the sense that I was already working while I was doing my MSCA fellowship. So it was easy for me to just come back home and resume my work back here in Nigeria. Of course, one of the challenges I faced was around infrastructure. The internet access was not too strong, of course. Then the lights too, was a bit challenging. And you agree with me that once you are in Europe, you really don't get to see some of these challenges. Of course, funding is also not a problem when you're in Europe, because you have access to a lot of funding. Your MSc fellowship is there. Some other granting agencies will also be there to to support you. So I didn't really have much challenges. One other thing that I did that I felt was also very useful for me was joining a community. This particular community is called LEAKS. This is Learning Innovation Competence Building System. They have what they call Global Leaks. They have Africa Leaks. They also have the one called Nigeria Leaks. What they do, simply is to find out or do research around how do we use innovation to propel development, most especially within developing countries. So I joined this particular, community, and I was able to, mix very well with them. As a matter of fact, I'm currently the president of Nigeria Leaks, which is like a hub to Africa Leaks in Nigeria as of now. So why did I return home? Of course, the first thing here is family, because I tried to actually bring my family, to Europe. It was pretty difficult, and you agree with me, because this was in the middle of COVID, so you knew everybody couldn't actually move around at all. So I found it very difficult to bring family to Europe. So the first thing in my mind was to go back home to to my family. Then at the same time, I also felt it's also important for me to be able to contribute the little I've learned, to see how I could actually apply some of the knowledge that I picked up in Europe within my country. So that way, I felt that will allow me to strengthen national research capacity within the country. Of course, I also felt it's important for me to also mentor young researchers, back home. And I'm very happy because this is beginning to yield, some some fruit, in the sense that I have colleagues now who are also interested in picking up some of these programs, sponsored by European Commission. So one of them recently, in fact, that was like maybe 2 days ago, actually, he made an application to CBS in the Netherlands, that is Copenhagen Business School, for him to also go and do his MSCA. So they've taken him, so they are going to start building his proposal now as we speak. I also had a lady, a doctor, who also happened to, got MSCA fellowship. I've forgotten the name, maybe in Spain, few weeks back. So I'm quite happy that some of this effort is beginning to yield fruit. So what are the challenges? Of course, I'm sure Precious is very familiar with this. The bureaucracy around here could be very, very stressful. Little things, they keep dragging it, and you keep wondering what exactly is going on. So I think that's quite a bit of challenge, with bureaucracy around here. Up there, you could walk up to your director and say, okay, these are my challenges, and within a very short period of time, you could get solution to those problems. But here, you have to go through your HOD. The HOD has to say yes, then you have to go back to your director. The director has to say yes, then you have to go back to the DG. The DG has to say, so the bureaucracy at times could be, be a very big challenge. Then the funding, of course, is also a problem. Once you are on your fellowship, we all understand that the money usually will not be a problem. But here now, you have to look for funding. Maybe you have to start looking out to write grants, or to respond to call for proposals, and the rest. Then the other thing, of course, is slow adoption of research recommendations. I'm sure we are also familiar with this. I'm also sure that this is also not peculiar to Nigeria alone, because we all make a lot of research recommendations, but how many of them do we actually see in action? Very few. So I think we also have the same problem here. Then again, even though I did not spend more than maybe 2 years or thereabout in Europe, but at the same time, when I got back, I experienced a little bit of culture shock. So that sounds funny, and I'm going to share one funny experience with you. When I got back home and I was trying to buy a loaf of bread, on the street, and and I was checking the bread for expiry date. The lady selling was looking at me, what's this guy doing? What exactly is he looking for? And I told her, look, and I said, this bread does not have expiry date. She was like, expiry date on bread? It's not possible. I mean, what are you saying? This doesn't have. So immediately I snapped back that, guy, you are back in Nigeria. You're not going to see expiry date on that loaf of bread. So you better buy it and leave the poor girl alone. So anyway, so they're quite a little bit of culture shock, when I actually got back. Then again too, I also learned that you also need to rebuild some of the professional networks that you had, so that people knew that, okay, guys, I'm back. So what can we do together? So don't neglect your your network, because you'll find this very, very important. Of course, you also need to maintain work-life balance as soon as you get back. For instance, now while I was there, you don't get to see your children troubling you. But now when you are back home, then you start thinking, okay, how do I pick them from school? Okay, when are they going to finish? When is the exam? How do we do revisions and the rest? So all that keep coming back to you. So again, you also have to bear that in mind, that you have to strike a balance between work and business. So what are the opportunities? I'm not going to lie to you. I think there are quite a number of opportunities, when I actually go back. As I said earlier, I didn't actually leave my colleagues back at home. I was, on constant interaction, with my colleagues back home. We actually did a project while I was in Italy. The project was based on COVID-19. We were looking at some of the challenges faced by researchers at that point in time. So we worked on that while I was in Italy. Then when I came back, I've also started, working with some of my colleagues to respond to call for proposals. As a matter of fact, recently, in about maybe a week or two ago, we submitted 2 proposals on Erasmus project. One was on green welding, one was on system dynamics, and those are the 2 projects that we did. Then part of what MSCA also allowed me to do, is also to be part of a consortium. I'm sure we are also familiar with MSCA.net, which was one of the programs by MSCA, whereby they share, awareness among MSCA programs. So I was able to, form part of the consortium for the new one. The new one is called Radiance. That's a new project now that will also last for like three years. So new one is so, and I'm actually part of this particular consortium under National Center for Technology Management. Again, too, even though I was maintaining constant link with my colleagues in Nigeria, once I got back home, I also made sure that I also link up with my colleagues in Italy. So once in a while I will do a shout out to them, saying, hi, how are you doing? What can we do together? So recently again, we responded to a call for proposal, on decarbonization, and this particular proposal we applied for, I think, the funding of around $250,000 US. So hopefully, if we scale through with the pre-proposal, we might be able to get to develop, full proposal for that particular project. Hopefully, we'll win. Another one that also happened was my supervisor, which is Professor Elena Fedolini, also called me at some point if I would be interested in contributing a chapter to a book, which and we've done that as we speak now. That particular chapter has been accepted, and it's going to be published, very soon. So these are some of the links that I made sure I maintain with my colleagues in Italy. Again, I think it's also important for us to, make sure that we also engage with policymakers. You agree with me that engaging policymakers is also very important, in the sense that they get to put light to some of the recommendations that we make as researchers. So what I'm also trying to do, is to make sure that I maintain, I also, maintain link with some of these, policymakers. And one of the things I did at some point was to engage in science, technology, and innovation policy for, for the country. So I was, involved in the implementation, strategy for that particular policy. Another one that I did was welding policy, for the nation here in Nigeria. One other thing that I've also found very useful, or that MSc also allowed me to do, is I'm now one of the national contact points, for MSCA in Nigeria. And this for me is actually very, very, helpful, because this has allowed me, to undergo so many training with regard to MSCA, with regard to mentorship, with regards to, grant writing and the rest. Then again, too, I've also, been called to speak at many of the rural assets webinars. I'm sure Precious is well familiar with this. So another one is also, MCA, webinar, which I also, sorry, give me 1 minute.
Sorry, I think Maruf should be rounding up shortly. So let's just give him time to do what he has to do.
Sorry,
Welcome back.
sorry about that. So
Welcome
I'm back.
back.
I'll round up in the next few minutes. So again, this is also one thing I also found very, useful, being able to, be a speaker in some of these, webinars. Then again, too, one of the things that I also found very useful, that MSCA also allowed me to do, is that right now I'm actually, working with MCAA. I'm actually one of their, staff on, what's it called? I'm working with them remotely, so to speak. I'm one of their survey officers. It's all because I'm also involved in MSCA. That's why I'm also able to, to do that. Of course, I've also engaged in reviewing proposals for MSCA fellowships. I've also reviewed proposal for International Science, Council. These are some of the things that I believe I was able to leverage on because I was involved with MSCA, fellowship. So what will I recommend for future MSCA returnees? I will say start
Maruf,
early.
can you please
is the
start
last
rounding up, because we still have one
Yes.
speaker left. Thank
Okay.
you.
I'm sorry, I'm taking a lot of time. So this is the last slide actually. So I will say you should start planning on early. Again, as I said, maintain, link with your colleagues, with your host institution, and make sure you also don't, don't strain your interaction with your colleagues back home. Then be flexible. I think somebody said this earlier. Be flexible. Don't be too optimistic. Be flexible in applying your skills. You may have something in mind that you actually wanted to do when you get back home. If it's not materializing at the moment, look for something else that you could do. Then, of course, please engage in mentorship. This is also very, very important. Thank you very much.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Maru. Very insightful. Thank you. I've also learned a lot from you. Let's go quickly to the last speaker so that we can open up the house for questions. Javier from Argentina, please welcome to the floor.
Thank you, Precious. Thank you for the invitation to be part of this webinar. I'm going to share the screen. Okay. There it is. Okay. So I hope not to be repetitive at this point. I guess I will be a bit, but my background is also a bit different. So hopefully I have some new insights. Let me tell you a little bit about that. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I did my PhD in political science at Northwestern University in the United States. So I am from the social sciences. After that, I went to the University of Frankfurt with a postdoctoral fellowship. And only then did I have a Marie Curie Fellowship at the University of Strasbourg in the Department of Philosophy. Sadly, this overlapped with the pandemic. But then after that, I came back to Argentina with a permanent position at the National Research Council, to which I applied while I was a Marie Curie Fellow at the University of Strasbourg. So that's what I've been ever since until now. I'm a research fellow at the National Research Council, and that is a research position. Luckily, it is a permanent one. What are the challenges that I faced that I think lead to some questions that are helpful asking oneself when one comes back to the original country? In my case, I had this particular situation where I was away for a long time because I went to do my PhD in the United States, and then I was in Europe. So I was like over 10 years abroad, which probably made the reintegration a bit more challenging than usual. But it wasn't, I wouldn't say it was a bad experience at all. It's just that there are useful things to think about. So this is why I formulated some questions. Well, the first issue is, of course, finding a position as and an important question, and this obviously depends on the country, is whether there are open competitive calls for positions. In Argentina, this exists. The National Research Council has a yearly open call for positions, and it is competitive. And by competitive, I mean you don't need connections or networks. It's not based on connections or networks. Actually, it's based on CV, and there's a blind review of your CV. I would say here that exists, although having a network is helpful. But in my case, I was lucky enough to get one of these positions while I was a Marie Curie Fellow. And of course, it's very important to think about these things while you are a fellow, because obviously it makes reintegration easier if you already have a position and you don't have to look for one. And when you are assessing what positions are worth applying to and where you have good chances, you have to think about like what positions rely on networks and connections and what positions are more open and CV based, and you need to think ahead what will increase your chances of getting each kind of position. Second challenge, I would say, is finding a working environment, and I mean, what group are you going to work with? I know people in the hard sciences often work in labs. And in the case of the social sciences, we usually have a research group. It's not attached to a lab or anything like that. It's a bit more open and flexible. And in my experience, finding the right working environment, the right group is a challenge. I mean, usually you get back and you know some people, you start working with some people, but you have to think to move around and see what is the group that will help you, meet your goals, fulfill your potential, help your professional development. And for that purpose, it is helpful to think about, whether each group shares your working standards. Do they share do they value your profile and experience, and can they help you achieve your goals? I've learned based on my experience that I have to basically screen the groups I'm interacting with, because you're not, I think in general, you're not necessarily attached to one group. You can look for another group if the one you're working with doesn't meet your expectations. Another challenge, it's been mentioned, building and rebuilding networks. Usually the longer you've been abroad, the thinner your networks in your home country are. In my case, I was able to keep some connections, but of course I lost many of them. If this is the case, when you get back, you really have to start meeting people or reconnecting with people. So you have to think about, like, okay, how many people do I know? What can I do to know more people? And how can I get in touch with? Who is a person who might be interested in working with me? And this might be based on research affinities, but it also might be based on background affinities. I've learned that sometimes people want to work with me because of my background, even if they do something very different to what I do. And actually, if we are creative, we can collaborate a lot, So sometimes I work well with people who have done their PhD in the United States, even if we don't have like very strong research affinities. But sometimes I work better on research affinities than on experiences. It's very random, but the only way to know is to meet with people, ask to meet, have a coffee, and that way you strengthen your local network, which I think is very important. And the last big challenge that I faced is adapting to local research agendas. I was abroad for a long time, which means I got used to international research agendas. I mean, the social sciences, we say discussions. I don't know if you call them like that in the hard sciences. But, I wrote for international journals, interested in certain topics. And when I got back to Argentina, I realized that I could still work on these topics. They just didn't have the same impact because there were like few people excited about them. And this is something that I've learned that I had to actively screen. What topics are people interested in? What topics have an impact in academia and beyond academia? How does my expertise connect with these topics? Meaning, is it easy for me to work on this topic that people are more interested in? How do I use my international background to address these topics that are like bigger at the local level? And to what extent can I bridge my interest in international research agendas, which agendas that have more local impact? Asking myself consciously these questions have helped me, develop strategies to be more successful at the local level. Okay, so more concretely, what are the strategies for facing these challenges? Well, apply to jobs and keep an eye open for non-academic gigs. When I came back, I mean, I don't want to bore you with all the details, but salary fluctuates a lot in Argentina. So I had a permanent position, but my salary was not very good. So what I did was complemented with non-academic gigs. In my case, I did translations, for example. And I'm sure for those who work in academia, I know if you work in industry, it's very different. If you work in academia, maybe you're all set. Maybe you're looking for a job and meanwhile you need some gigs to get by. I think it's helpful to keep an eye open. Networks are also very helpful for that purpose. Trial and error, this is also something I learned, that there's no blueprint. You really have to try working groups, try connections. Sometimes it looks like you can work with someone, but then with time you learn that this person has a different idea of how to do things. Sometimes you're working with a group and it looks like the group is in sync with you, but it isn't. And as I said before, you try. If it doesn't work, just move somewhere else. Don't waste time working with people or groups that don't meet your expectations. Meet with people, and this is always helpful. Look for those with professional affinities, and keep in mind that sometimes you connect better with people who on paper look like are further away from you in terms of background or in terms of research interest. You never know who is a good academic partner. So it's again a trial and error thing, and trial and error means you have to try a lot, which means meeting as many people as possible. And in terms of local research agendas, we'll use local media, specialized publications, and academic events to follow what are the local trends. You know, you need to get a sense. For me, this was helpful. It took me some time to learn this, that I need to have a sense of what people are actually interested in. That's not the same that people were interested in at an international level. So what can you use? Well, you know, get on Twitter, get on Instagram, see what people are posting, follow specialized publications, and go to academic events and sometimes to non-academic events to see what people are interested in. And in terms of local research, also find other people with international experience and connections, because this is helpful for bridging the gap between your international background and your need to succeed at the local level. You know, I think most of you, and that's my case too, and I think we all should try to keep international standards and international connections. My colleagues have given already some advice in this regard, and I completely agree. I think I would add meeting local people who are interested in international connections. I mean, it's good if they have international experience. Whether they have international experience or not, do they want to, for example, bring people from abroad? You have to actively move around to find people who are interested in these things, and this will help you do research at the local level, but connected to international research trends. So to finish, just some quick suggestions of things to do. I mean, they repeat a bit what I've said. Move around. Don't stay the first place you land. When you get back, you know, meet people, try different groups, be patient. This has been said, you know, it takes time. You have to, you know, try and error means you have to wait. Things are not going to work out in the first try. Be humble. I mentioned this because I think when you come back from abroad, sometimes people have a defensive attitude that, you know, they think you know everything because you've been abroad. And, you know, maybe sometimes we do think that. So, you know, it's better to be mindful and avoid coming across like people who think they know everything, you know. This is connected to being flexible. You know, maybe people at the local level, they work in a different way, and we want to keep our international standards. It's good trying to keep those standards, but also we have to realize that, you know, some countries have very specific challenges. People have all kinds of trajectories, and we have to be flexible to work in the way other people work. We have to find our place. You know, if you don't like a place, leave. This sounds stupid and obvious, but for me, it took a time to learn, you know, that actually if I'm in a place and it's not helping me achieve my goals or develop, I should look for another place and move. And that in the long term, that's much better. And that there's a transition cost, but it's much better. Adapt, but not too much. I mean, you know, when you get back, you have to adapt to the local level, but you also want to bring your standards to try to help things get better, you know, and this is a negotiation. And finally, as already has been said, you know, rely on your local MCAA chapter because they can help you meet some of these challenges. You know, these are people who share your background. They probably know the challenges. So this connection can help you do things, you know, maybe organize something, do something that is helpful for you and that is helpful for the research community in general. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful presentation, Javier. I think our time is fast spent, so I will just open the floor for questions. Thank you so much to all the speakers. I think one thing that have stood out is that you have to maintain your connections both at home and your international connections. Find the MCAA chapter around you and please get involved. You need all the connections that you can get. And then there's something that Javier said that is very profound. He said, be humble, because people are saying that you're coming from abroad. So already there's a defensive behavior towards you. They already feel you. And then you don't come like a god, like you know it all. You have to connect for you to be able to make any form of impact. So you have to go down, be able to connect, find a common ground. Even if what they are doing is not of international standard, you can't stay in your high heavens and try to start correcting and saying, okay, I want to. No, you have to be able to connect. And then with your focus that you are bringing in something better, but give it time, be patient. I think most of the speakers have said, be patient. Yes, be patient, give it time. And with that, we are sure you will be able to reintegrate. So are there questions for our speakers? Let me see hands raised if there are questions. Are there questions for our speakers? Okay, I can see a hand from Manuela. Manuela, please, can you ask your question?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, very well.
Okay, thank you very much to the organizers and all the speakers. It was really nice to listen all your experience. I'm Argentinian, so I have some questions to Javier in particular, if possible. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to ask to Javier about, you said that you applied for a permanent position, so I guess you applied for the CONICET Assistant Investigator Researcher. Did you apply for the normal early call or for this call Ventanilla Abierta, the open window call? And how was the process? And if in particular, it's true that you were via abroad for so long, but in particular, how was the process validation or evaluation for the Marie Curie experience?
Hola, Manuela. Okay, thank you for the question. When I applied, so the CONICET in Argentina, the National Research Council has a yearly call for applications, but it changes. It varies year to year. So I was lucky because when I applied, there was still a special call for researchers who had been abroad over 3 years. This obviously made things easier for me. Otherwise, it would have been more difficult, much more difficult, I think, because then sort of local experience, you know, if you're in the general pool, the local experience tends to have more weight informally, no, not formally, but, you know, connections have a weight. So that was my experience. That window is not there anymore, unfortunately. I didn't know they had like a, how do you call it? Like an open call, like a rolling based, it's usually called in English, that you can always apply. So that's all I can say. I don't know what are the options now. I am able to say because I had applied through the regular, you know, the general application, and I didn't make it. I made it through the special call for international, you know, it's called international researchers, but unfortunately that's not there anymore. Could you please repeat the second question?
See how they evaluate your international experience, the Marie Curie, because I know that in the regular call it's more important, as you mentioned, the national way.
Yeah.
And also, if I can add another question, what about funding? Are you facing issues?
Okay, good question about this Marie Curie, because I think this is important for everyone, not just in Argentina. So my experience, it's a bit disappointing in that regard. They didn't really consider it like a big thing that I had a Marie Curie, you know. In Europe, everyone knows that it's very important to have a Marie Curie, but here it's just considered some funding. And this has to do with, you know, local standards sometimes not matching European or international standards, you know. Some very local things, like being part of a local research group that are at an international level, is meaningless that actually has a lot of weight. It's called this Proyectos Cofinanciados. It's like co-funded research project. It's something that exists only in Argentina, but for the National Research Council, that is a big thing. And of course, I didn't have it because I had been abroad for many years. And then I had the Marie Curie, which internationally is very important, but then CONICET said, yeah, okay, whatever, this is just one random postdoc position. So that is a bit disappointing, but in my experience, but you know, it doesn't mean, you know, CONICET has different committees. So maybe in the hard sciences, biology, I don't know what's your field, but they might know what it is and value it more than in the social sciences. Sorry, now I forgot the new question.
What about funding? Funding.
Funding is terrible. Funding is terrible. So you know, it also, I mean, I was going to say the global south, or I like to call them just underdeveloped countries. It's not like Europe or the United States, but now even Europe or the United States is completely unstable and no one knows what's going to happen. So there's no safe place. So, you know, in Argentina, the situation is the National Research Council wasn't dissolved like the president promised he would do. So that's a good thing. But there are like cuts, you know, and the salary so is significantly less now than it was when I came. So one thing I mentioned, this is why, I mean, for me, it is important. Non-academic gigs is important. You know, I was able to find a teaching position at a big private university, Universidad de Itela, and that's super helpful for me. It depends on the field and where you're living. So I would say that the salary right now, it allows you to make a living, but it's very tight and probably everyone is looking for gigs beyond that.
Thank you, Javier. Manuela, I hope you're good with this explanation. So are there any more questions? I'll leave room for just one question because our time is fast spent. One question and we are out. Once again, thank you to the speakers, Javier, Danielle, Vishwas, and Maruf. It was a very insightful presentation. Maybe I should just ask one question to Vishwas. Was there something, a particular challenge that made you feel like going back to Europe, like leaving India this minute and packing your bag back to Europe? What was it and how did you overcome it?
You're asking me if I felt any time that I want to go back to Europe?
Yes.
No, that didn't happen to me. I think I restrict myself to visiting Europe, not really
Okay.
going back.
Okay. Daniel, was there any time like that for you?
For me, I always wanted to come back to Mexico. So I knew the challenges, how challenging it would be. I think that's already helpful when you have already, you know, your mindset.
Okay, I think your minds are already made up and that helped. So that's something else we can put in the, yeah, as long as your mind is made up, it helps. Okay, Ashish.
Yeah, hello. I have a question to everyone, all the speakers. But I know that once you go abroad, your desirability increases a bit for your home country. But does there come a time where it peaks and drops down? It like you become too expensive or less desirable for the home country, or you think that it doesn't happen.
Well, I can say for Mexico, the competition is so big, like so many people abroad trying to come back that I don't really think it's much of a, you know, of a plus. It's a lot of people waiting for the job market.
I think it depends on, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I think Daniel is true. Vishwas, if you have something to say, you can add.
Yeah, just to add to Ashish's comment that it depends on the skill sets also. Depends on what you've done in the past and where you're going to apply. For example, if you're going to apply in academia, especially in India, I think the competition is pretty fierce and also a lot of applicants. But in industry, if they're looking for PhD candidates with some experience, you may not really find good candidates. But yeah, if you have postdoc and Marie Curie fellowships, I think that helps. Yeah, it depends on where you're heading. Industry with PhD and postdoc, I think industry is also looking for some of them. It's really good. And India, especially if you want to make it on your own, I think this is the best time because the startup ecosystem, entrepreneurship, funding opportunities are huge. So I don't really see any challenges. If you have good ideas and really want to implement something back in India, because there are so many problem areas that you can tackle. And funding and ecosystem is really well built and you can really fly.
Okay,
And
thank
just
you.
just to follow up on Manuela's question, like since Javier answered about Argentina, so in other countries, do the employers look at MSc as something big deal, or is like a normal fellowship for them? In India, Mexico, or in Nigeria?
Marie, what was your experience?
Sorry, Ashish, I didn't get that.
The MSCA you got, was it looked like a big deal when you came to Nigeria? How was it evaluated? Or it was just a random fellowship? Like they just treated it like, okay, it's one of those fellowships.
Well, funny enough, I'm not even sure too many people knew something about MSCA at all. So
Exactly. Exactly.
really, but the
Yeah.
awareness was very low, so nobody knew much
Yeah.
about it. So it wasn't really a big deal. It was maybe
Yeah.
now people are now beginning to see the relevance of that particular program. So a lot of people are now beginning to apply, but then it wasn't a big deal at all.
Yeah, that's it.
If I can
All
say,
right.
for Mexico, I think it's prestigious, but it won't be a priority. You know, people would look at your CV, at your papers, mostly, and then I don't think that would make, like a huge difference which funding. As long as you have papers, that would be the criteria.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So thank you. It was an interesting time. I was actually looking forward to Maruf answering that question Ashish asked. You know, when you're abroad, you feel like coming back home. There's this enthusiasm and things you want to do. And then when you're home, like I see myself smiling when I'm approaching Abuja. And then 10 minutes into the country, you see some things and you're like, Maruf, what's the experience? Do you have that?
For me, one of the things that actually, for me, keeps me going is actually the family. So I'm usually eager to go back home to meet my family. So that for me, yeah, it's always, one thing I look forward to. Then the colleagues in the office are also quite interesting. So I also look forward to working with them. So for me, it's win-win.
That's a nice one. All right. Thank you so much to our speakers. Thank you for everyone that made it till this time. Oh, we still have about 15 people watching. Thank you for your patience. And I hope you learned. I hope you are excited as I am, because I've learned so much. I've gathered so much. Thank you. And I will bring the webinar to a close.